which is for to you, what I'm doing right now is streaming on rabbitholecentral.tv. And what I have up is the beginning of the news, which is 475 Kent. And there is some question now that 200 people are going to be moved out of 475 Kent. And I believe Nico Haupt wants to go over there and kind of check it out. And what this is a sample of a letter to Mayor Bloomberg discussing it. And this letter is saying to Mayor Bloomberg, let's see if I can make this work better. Dear Mayor Bloomberg, my attention has recently been drawn to the problem of the Artists Building at 475 Kent Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. You are certainly aware by now that over 200 people are in danger of losing their homes and workplaces permanently, which usually spells financial ruin in a community already subjected to considerable risk. In the spirit of the cultural tradition that has long prevailed in this great city, I urge you to do everything you can to help those who work and live at 475 Kent Avenue to return to their studios immediately and to foster our common creative capital. Sincerely, the undersigned. So now, what is the whole point of this letter? It seems as though there's a very valuable perspective at 475 Kent in Brooklyn that might shed light on some of what was going on in 9/11 in terms of the images that we saw on television versus some of the realities of what went on as the World Trade Center came down. Now, let's see, I'm broadcasting to you via rabbitholecentral.tv from Gramercy Park. This is my apartment. And I can take calls. You'll see on the website that's 212-982-0021. And what I want to talk about is yesterday I was going to go over to BCAT, and let me bring that up for you. Here's BCAT. It's the Brooklyn Community Access Television. And there was one person, Gary Popkin, who had wanted me on his show to discuss 9/11. And I did an entire show yesterday, and I promoted it, and I said I'd be there, and Nico Haupt got it out on his wire. And then I changed my mind. Now, why did I change my mind? Although I can see in listening again to the show yesterday, because I recorded it, that he did say the discussion would be Building 7 when I had agreed to come and discuss. I thought it was going to be on 9/11. Now, I had no problem with there being differences of opinion, but I didn't want to discuss Building 7. Now, to a lot of people, Building 7 is the most suspicious because no airplane flew into it, and yet it was, by 5 o'clock, it was gone. It seemed, some people say it's a controlled demolition, and some people say that about the World Trade Centers, Towers 1 and 2, because they came in a free fall, and in order to do that, you'd have to have the thermite and so on. And for a number of years, I was sort of more concerned with a direction Webster Tarpley was taking me in, which was quite brilliant for international terrorism and how the different agencies are doing a lot of false flag operations, particularly in some place like the Middle East where there's such poverty. You can start to recruit people into hate groups, even in the name of their own religion. But it doesn't much make any difference what the religion is if you can sort of foster these images of suspicion and mistrust and start to break the possibility of connections of empathy of the other. You need to create an enemy in order to justify weapons that you want to use against the enemy. It would be impossible to use a weapon against somebody if you could empathize with their humanity and know that their needs were really the same as yours. And I think I remember Marshall Rosenberg talking about his experience in the prison system, and he had achieved a certain, I guess, breakthrough in the room, and this one inmate was profoundly affected. And I think he was probably talking about the different needs that people have and the different strategies that they use to meet their needs. And this inmate came to him later, if I'm not mistaken, I should refer to it exactly in the book. And he said he just needed some time to process it, and I think he realized that the man that he had killed, if he had been able to empathize with him and see that his trying to meet his, using a strategy, trying to meet his need, probably he was in bed with, you know, the murderer's wife. Because when I was in San Quentin prison, this was usually the basis of the murder sentences that people were serving. And it wasn't until years later that I started to become interested in any kind of human development that promised to allow people to get beyond their possessiveness and their jealousy. And you can see that if in personal relationships this is so difficult, and it would take somebody like a Marshall Rosenberg, and many years later, and being in prison to reflect on it, to see that there might be another way of looking at somebody who's in bed with your wife. And it's not something initially easy to perceive that there would be that possibility to make a connection. But ultimately, when you have years on your hands, and then you have access to a teaching like Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, it just might happen. And so this is why I'm very interested in nonviolent communication, and I'm always aiming to achieve these types of connections of empathy, so that even in the case of the World Trade Center, obviously somebody did it. And so if it's not going to be the hijackers, and if it's not going to be Al-Qaeda in an operation in Al-Qaeda in a cave in a laptop, even if it's an elaborate cave, then who did do it becomes more problematic, because it's easy to just sort of send off to prison or even kill people who don't influence your life that much or don't affect your life that much. But what about if the people affect your life a lot and they actually influence you with more power than you have the ability to influence them? Then it becomes scary, and that's when people want to kind of fall in line and sort of go along with the status quo, and then the secrets start to be kept. And it's a matter of sort of busting up this secrecy that's going to be the hope for achieving the clarity that we're looking for in order to move into the liberated society that we want to have. It's easy to talk about having a liberated society and zero-point energy exists and we don't have to have global warming. But in actuality, if such devices are around, what has held it back? Is it only evilness on the side of people who like to charge for electricity and so on? Or is it something within ourselves? Our own possessiveness when it comes to an intimate partner. So if we can start to look at our behavior on an individual level, then I think we have the seeds to understand it on a collective level. Again, when I was in San Quentin, I think it was a dentist that pointed out to me that most of the people there were disproportionate number of African Americans, and mostly the crime was a crime of passion that I just described. And in this case, within their culture, not to kill the person who was in bed with your wife would have been so humiliating within that culture. It would have been unacceptable to consider any other way. So, in the same way, just to give you a feeling of what cultural pressure is like, what type of cultural pressure now is being called to bear upon people who are recipients of grants and awards in the various institutions. If we can start to understand how that exists and empathize with it, then what we can do is, within our own lives, start to work with those challenges. And as we start to work with those challenges in our own life, then we can be more patient when we don't see the rapid change coming from the higher institutions or those most powerful people who would be responsible for, as Harold Channer talked yesterday, the creative editing, or the enormous coordination of the creative editing that was going on in order to convince the public that we had been attacked and airplanes were flying into the World Trade Center, and we must mobilize and protect ourselves and ensure peace and safety not only for us, but go out with an iron clamp and ensure peace and safety all over the world. I think a lot of people know that that's not quite the case. I think a lot of people are under the impression, they may not want to articulate it, you know, as you're getting involved in your hedge funds and you realize that the stock market is so determined by the price of gold that your own nest egg might be somehow strengthened by this activity. And so you're sort of guilty about it and you sort of bury that and you don't quite look at it. But I don't think most people are quite buying that it's for altruistic reasons that we're abroad. On the other hand, if we don't get over our shame and our guilt, we can't really perceive the deepest level of what happened or the clearer level of what happened. And that it's not just sort of a blowback that people abroad have done this to us, the terrorists, the Muslims, the extremist Muslims, because they're so angry and we have been so unjust, taking oil away and not giving them that much in return, or just giving it to royal families who aren't really doing much to help the people. But the deeper level is seeing, and again, if we can get over our guilt and shame, it's to understand how have the enormous weapons been funded. And if we can understand the enormous weapons, not just some demonstrations that we've seen of, you know, killing people in Iraq, but big weaponry, the kind of weaponry that can bring down buildings like the World Trade Center. Once we can wrap our heads around that, and in order to do that, you have to let go of the guilt and shame, then we can be a little closer to understanding who it is that we have to be patient with and have to forgive. Much in the same way we would want to forgive our best friend or our wife instead of killing them and winding up with a life sentence in San Quentin. Punishment never works. And so it's for that reason that I'm not a big one on accountability and, you know, bring them all to justice, because I think ultimately justice lies within. And I think it's been said in the Bible, for those who like to glean bits and pieces out of the Bible, justice is God's, not ours. And that can get a big burden off of us once we understand that. So, if there's any calls, I will take them now. I'm at 212-982-0021. I can see this mic level was set rather low, so I don't know if you were able to hear all of that. And if there are no calls, then I will probably sign out. So, again, I wasn't at BCAP yesterday because I didn't want to talk about Building 7. And I called to your attention now today. We have the situation happening with 475 Kent. And hopefully we will be able to have access to this building that they're trying to move people out of, and see what that will reveal. So there you go. I'm Paula Gloria, and this has been a rather brief episode, only 14 minutes, farther down the rabbit hole. If anybody wants to log on later, I can bring up the stream. Otherwise, it's Paula Gloria, over and out. So here we have Frank Craven on the phone, and Frank is the producer of What's Ailing and Healing America. How long have you had the show, Frank?
I've been on for 8 years, every Friday night, 9:30, Channel 34, What's Ailing and Healing America. We complain against the government, and we offer up solutions as a right and duty to ask and answer questions.
Now, Frank, I know that you and I share a spiritual interest. Can you talk about how spirituality plays into your political work? And because some people think it's a complete contradiction, and you can't do both.
No, quite the contrary. Because of spirituality, Martin Luther King was able to stand his ground and keep going. So was Mohandas Gandhi. Great spiritual leaders like Jesus, who was a revolutionary and was tortured to death, and many communist heroes throughout many revolutionary countries in Latin America stand on the ground of their spirituality, that believe that God is the all-encompassing reality, and everything else is just an illusion and false. And our strength, and also gives us a sense of humor to carry on, because even though we have sociopaths in the White House who prefer to bombing over diplomacy and even advocate torture, we know that somewhere in them there's a human hiding who's looking to find God, and we'll just carry on and be loving and human and spiritual and good and grounded in the light, and eventually the truth will fail. I mean, the truth will prevail and the lies will fail.
Right. Is there an image that I can put up on the internet, some of your artwork or something? Because I can roll that in as I'm doing this.
Wow, I was just happy. Well, FrankCraven.com has an art gallery.
Okay, let me.
I just recently had a friend over, Michelle of the Green Party, who actually shot a bunch of my paintings now and have made some really interesting, or taken it to the next level. But if you go to FrankCraven.com and then go click on the art gallery, there's a few paintings there. In particular, the one that I like is called Pray for Iraq, which took me a year to paint, because every morning I get up and I get my wet paintbrush out and spend an hour or two at the canvas. And I made this massive Guernica type of painting of this poor Iraqi woman being subjected to this ongoing bombing campaign by an out-of-control thief who wants to steal the oil from the sovereign nation of Iraq, instead of allowing their oil to be traded on the free market. For some reason, America thinks that oil belongs to us, and we have a right to go in there and kill people. And every day, American soldiers die for a false reason. But the lies are unraveling, and the American people and the American soldiers themselves realize that this is an invasion and an illegal occupation, and has nothing to do with defending freedom and justice for all. Anyway, I wanted to comment on your show today, and I'm glad to be on your Rabbit Hole Central TV program now through the telephone, and thank you for inviting me on board. I also saw the show with a friend of mine who you met when we saw the Shawshank Redemption, Dr. Joyce Hilson. What do you think, Doc, about Ugly George?
Well, I was struck. I mean, he certainly got the market for unpredictable pornography, and
right, the totally spontaneous pornography. Now, the pornography is scripted, but that's street, lift your shirt type of stuff.
And
no, hang on, it was not scripted.
Who watched the program till the end of the show and called in to find out both condemn it and when it was on next. But I was also struck.
No, hang on, I didn't understand that. What's your name again?
That's Dr. Joyce Hilson. You met her when we went to...
Oh, right. Hi, Joyce. Hi, Joyce.
Hi, Paula. I was struck by the end of the show, by the allegations about Obama, about the homosexuality and the cocaine use in 1999 when he was state representative, from someone who was willing to undergo a lie detector test to substantiate those claims. And I was surprised that no national media has followed up on it. Why do you think that that's the case?
Well, just two things, Dr. Joyce. I've been setting mic levels and things like that, so I want to make sure I understand you clearly. When you first saw my interview with Ugly George, you said you were critical and wanted to call up to complain?
No, not at all.
No.
What I said is I was struck by the Christian right calling up to complain about the Ugly George show, at the same time watching it avidly and trying to find out when the next episode was. In other words, they were his market.
Yeah, they were totally against it, supposedly, but they sat through the whole thing.
Right. Now tell me, Frank, because this is really interesting to me, because I'm a West Coast girl, so I didn't live through this. Did you actually see his show when it was on cable? Public access?
Yeah, he would have you just walk around town and ask girls to lift their shirts. It was like the original Girls Gone Wild type of show.
Yeah, because when I talked to Christine Ebersole...
Say, get the hell out of my face, but he became known as the guy who did that, and oftentimes women would show themselves, and it was all very fun, because that's the fun of it. It was spontaneous. It was unscripted, unlike pornography, where it's all hired actors and you know what's going to happen. This is like on the street and spontaneous. And also at that time, people were burning their bra. They were against the Vietnam War. There was like hippies. There was a revolution in consciousness. So Ugly George came at a time when people were waking up and liberating themselves in new and different ways, and public access was new. And being naked on the street was a new concept, and it actually was no big deal. You could lift your shirt, and a lightning bolt would strike you dead. You know, it's no problem. Big deal. The body's beautiful.
He's referring to women.
Yeah, but in France and Spain and in Greece, throughout Europe, you know, they have naked statues everywhere, and billboards with naked women and toplessness on the beaches, and the body is beautiful, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. And America is so prudish and uptight about these things that they have to wake up, and Ugly George served a great purpose at the right time. He was the right guy at the right time.
Wow, that's so interesting, Frank, because actually when you talk about Greece, in Crete, you can still see the goddesses from a previous religion, really. It's way previous to Christianity. The breasts were totally exposed all the time.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and in Rome, too, you see statues of guys with their penises hanging out, too. So what? The body's beautiful. It's naked. There's naked statues all over Rome and Greece and everything, because why not? It's, you know, God made us into what God made us, and we can only respect it and love it and not be ashamed of it. That's the problem with Western religion. The Jewish religion, the Christians, and the Muslims are all into guilt and shame and feel. And modesty is good and important, but to be ashamed of yourself creates disease and illness.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking if you were in Crete.
Remember that thought, Dr. Joyce?
Partially.
Okay.
It certainly doesn't create health. I don't know if it creates disease. It may provoke disease or may worsen disease.
But don't you agree that there's a lot of healing because of placebos and
yes, absolutely.
And
it's the best healing if you can do it yourself or do something that has less side effects. Then there's something with the least side effects, either endogenous placebo or exogenous placebo.
So, granted that placebos do have a very great healing effect, that means that diseases.
Actually, there's a study, Frank, that was done in Britain, where they took agitated, developmentally delayed individuals, like basically retarded adults, and they gave them strong psychotropic drugs. I don't know if it was Haldol or Thorazine versus placebo, and 76% of both groups responded. So that's really phenomenal.
Yeah, that's far more than half. So what I'm saying is, based upon those results and plus many other things in yours and others' experience, I maintain that most diseases are basically psychologically derived, and that human understanding must come to terms with the fact that oftentimes diseases are triggered by their own psychological belief systems, and therefore guilt and shame, which is can be subconsciously a cause for disease, even though later on manifestations are physical and remedies must be found to combat the physical disease. But
well, they certainly can make any disease worse, whether they're the actual cause or not. I think they may be in some and not in others. You know, diseases have multiple causes, but they certainly don't enhance recovery, and they certainly don't enhance function.
Hey, Joyce, Dr. Joyce, do you have an internet right now? Because you could be watching the show as I'm streaming it.
No, we don't have internet connection here. Sorry.
Okay, so let me tell you, I was just getting an apple pie out of the oven, and I wanted to discuss with you, are you an oncologist?
I'm a neurologist.
You're a neurologist, okay. Because I had read a book by a Dr. Keim, and the name of the book was Sunlight Can Save Your Life. And he was talking about how in around the 1930s, they were doing some studies with banks of ultraviolet lights that would be behind the surgeons as they were operating. And they found that if the ultraviolet light was strong, really strong, but not strong enough to sunburn the back of the neck of the surgeons,
yes,
the secondary infections would go way, way down.
Oh, that's very, very interesting.
But they stopped the research because at that time antibiotics were coming on the scene, and they preferred to push antibiotics as a solution.
Very interesting. I'm unaware of that. That's absolutely fascinating.
Yes, it is absolutely fascinating. And I was in the island of Cyprus at that time because I had made money, and I was just, you know, kind of like Frank, I kind of get discouraged about the policies of the country, and I felt I didn't want to be responsible. And I think in a way it was a cop-out, but it was the best I could do then. So there I am on the island of Cyprus, I'm reading this book, and I start to experiment with myself. And so what they were saying, what Dr. Keim's research was showing, that if you had vitamin A, vitamin C, and vitamin E, you could metabolize this.
Vitamin D too?
No, because the sun produces the D. What he was saying is there is a more sun-friendly diet, that if you didn't have meat, alcohol, and tobacco, the sunlight would actually draw out the toxins in the skin. You would start to sweat, and that would push out the toxins. And then after that initial sweat had burned off, then your skin would start to put in a sort of a lubrication of its own, which was very antibacterial. And that would explain the kind of beautiful sheen that you see on somebody who has a nice suntan. You know, not all overly done, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so he said the first sweat would be really stinky, so you could take a shower or you could just keep sweating it out. But then after that kicked in, then the oils, the deep oils would come up, and that would be one of the greatest protections to help you in the future, to, you know, more...
Never use suntan lotion. I've always felt my natural body connection with earth, sun, sand, and salt water is the best protection, and anything else is just ridiculous and actually contrary to my good health.
No, he actually said not to use the oil, because if you used the oil, you would stop that.
That's very, very interesting, because you know the rate of infections, resistant infections in hospitals, hospital-acquired resistant infections is high. And if that is true, and there are no side effects or minimal side effects for the ultraviolet light, that's something that could be in patients' rooms who are in hospital for a variety of reasons to lower the rate of like methicillin resistance there.
Say Joyce, Dr. Joyce, do you have a website I could put up as I'm switching the show?
On the roof decks of hospitals so people can go upstairs and take sun therapy.
I'd be interested in looking at this further. Now, Dr. Keim, how do you spell the last name? No, Paula?
Keim, K-I-M-E.
K-I-M-E, and his first name is?
I can't remember.
Okay, I'll look it up.
The name of the book is called Sunlight Can Save Your Life.
I'll look it up.
And what I did was I tried to get in touch with the author because, first of all, before I go on, Joyce, do you have a website that I could put your image on the show as you're talking?
No, I have an email. No,
okay.
I don't have a website.
It's okay. I mean, this is all spontaneous and unplanned. But
I will.
I do, frankcraven.com.
I know. I have yours. When you talk, Frank, then I go over to yours. There's just a gorgeous picture. Authority versus Majority Production Company. Yeah. Welcome to www.frankcraven.com. You've got a guitar there.
Right.
And an extraordinarily handsome person. I guess that's you, right, in a few years ago?
Yeah, but then you scroll down. Isn't there another picture there?
Yeah, let me scroll down. Oh, yeah, there you are.
Yeah, I would like to just mention, too, that Paula Gloria and I and Alan Steinfeld were interested to see this guy, Dr. Kirtan, this yogi from India, who has been documented by a university of Midwest somewhere to not have eaten since 1995, and he just feeds off sunlight, and he just watches the sunrise and sunsets, and he teaches you how to... He says how the photons of the sun are very healing and nurturing to all of plant life, all of Mother Earth. Everything on planet Earth is actually in existence and nurtured by this rays of the sun. And that we as humans, even though we're creatures of God, and we have within us the capacity to feed off of the photon rays of the sun to nurture ourselves, and we don't have to take normal foods and liquids as a regular way of nurturing ourselves, right? You saw this guy. He was a real living person that was documented who hadn't eaten in 15 years.
No, absolutely. I want to connect now with Joyce, and I'm going to stay on that. Thank you, Frank, for bringing that up. Dr. Joyce, are you there again?
Yes, I'm going to mention a name to you. There's someone named Arthur Robinson.
Uh-huh.
a leading expert on vitamins, and he has a newsletter. I don't know if it's called News and Reviews.
Yeah, but before, I don't want to do vitamins. Let me stay on what Frank brought up, okay? And we'll do that later, because I don't want to lose this thread.
Okay.
Okay, now Frank, can you hear each other at the same time?
Two phones. We're both on the party line.
Okay, so you can both hear. Okay, so now I really want to go into this very carefully, okay? And I'm going to require all your meditative focus, Frank, because I know that you have extraordinary healing powers.
Thank you. Well,
Okay.
we all do. I give myself permission to allow it
I know.
to best. But all of us are naturally healers as we live on this planet, and God has
Okay.
us all.
Okay, now try to stay really focused, because some people have asked me, Paula, would you take your shirt off for Ugly George? Okay? And I want you to hear what my answer is. I have always had that picture of the goddess on my website, or whenever I had control over it. And it's the one where she's showing her breasts, and she's holding two snakes. And the snakes, I think, represent the Kundalini energy. So it's how can we master our power? And if we have our power, we can heal anything. Anything can be healed if we have access to our full divinity.
I'm reminded of the Liberty symbol of France. The symbol of France is the goddess of the woman carrying the banner across the barricade, and her breasts are exposed.
Right, exactly. Okay, so now here's my own personal story. One of my viewers recently, and he sent me some money from Manhattan Neighborhood Network, so you really pay attention and make sure that those who really care about your work enough to send you money, that you're really attending to whatever needs that they feel are being met by your shows.
Yeah,
And
we in Public Access TV are serving a great higher purpose for the vast majority that have a tremendous appetite for the truth.
yeah,
Mainstream TV, commercial TV, just wants to sell you a new car and put you in further debt.
exactly. So it really, it's a real validation when someone cares enough to do that. So this viewer said, he started to ask me a lot of questions about mantras and transcendental meditation, because I had played the tribute that Howard Stern did to Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who passed away.
Yeah, February 5th, God blessed him.
Right, right. Okay, so now I was explaining, he wanted to know some formula about the mantras, how they were assigned. And I answered back and I said, although I don't do this practice anymore, I honor the promise that I made when I was given this information to keep it secret. And then he answered back and said he no longer does TM and he didn't want to offend me. And then I said, look, I'm glad you brought up the whole issue of mantras, because I've meant to do a show about it. And now, Frank, that I have you and Joyce paying attention and we can collectively take a journey, here is what I'm going to offer. One of the greatest teachers I was blessed to have had, his name was Jean Klein. And Jean Klein got his enlightenment in India in about the 50s, after going through the disappointment of World War II in Germany. He told me that the mantra takes a lifetime, the mystery of the mantra takes a lifetime to understand, and chances are you won't, so don't. And so what he was implying, that a lot of people doing transcendental meditation on a routine basis are more addicted to the routine than actually paying attention to the spontaneous invitation that life gives you. But if you can stumble across a great body of knowledge, and this knowledge of the mantras is a tremendous body of knowledge, if you can incorporate it in such a way that this lifetime study makes it come into your life naturally, then so be it. You've accomplished a great unfolding of a mystery. Now, to explain in my personal humble way what hooking the energy means, using the metaphor of the body, and using what Frank just brought up, that we've encountered a master who lives off of sunlight, here is my humble offering and experience in this study. I was sitting at Stuyvesant Park at about 8 o'clock in the morning, and I was feeling the warmth of the sun on me. I was closing my eyes, sort of going into a meditative state, and it was like my body was thirsty for the nourishment of the sun. Now when I looked around, it was really early Sunday morning. There weren't many people there, but there were two black guys on the bench across from me. Stuyvesant Park is pretty big. And I suspect they were homeless. Now, they lock this park and they open it up at 6 in the morning. So it's not like they had just woken up from there, because when I go down to the East River, I actually see the people sleeping there. So wherever these people spent the night, they had gotten up and then come into the park. So I am sort of flanked by 2 homeless people. And they're enjoying the sunlight too. And we're just sort of sitting there, and 5 minutes goes by, 10 minutes goes by. And I tell you, Frank, it got to a certain moment where I felt like we were doing a group meditation. I don't think they had their eyes closed, but I still felt connected with them, even though I had come from Gramercy Park in my nice warm apartment, and they had probably spent the night out in the street. We were one in that park together. We weren't on the same bench, but we were one. And my body is like longing for more nourishment. It's longing for more sunlight, for the warmth that I would get if I had my top off. And so I took my top off. There I am in Stuyvesant Park, and there's 2 people next to me. What happened was...
Did you have a brassiere on?
No, I was naked, completely topless. And the sun came on my breasts, and it just felt like I was drinking it in with my breasts. And these 2 guys, because we were so vibed in, they were like my protectors. So I had my eyes closed, and I had a hat on, and I pulled the hat down so that it was covering my eyes, because the strength of the sun, I didn't really want it on my eyes. And I felt like they were protecting me. So if anybody would come by, it would be okay. And it was like, it was so cool. I had just hooked the energy directly of the sun. It wasn't a mantra, but it's the same skill. This is what I'm proposing. The same skill to use a mantra correctly. You have to pick it up at the right moment. You have to wait for the invitation. I mean, you don't have to do anything, and I'm sure you can jump on the mantra, you know, and it will still give you some result. I could have sat down and say, you know, who cares who comes by, and I rip off my top and I go, who, you know, see, take that, or, you know, try to arrest me. The point that I'm making is it wasn't that type of energy that I had. It was just, here is a moment in the light of all eternity where it's just between me and the sun and these 2 people here. And it worked. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I'm reminded of the mantra when you say mantra is sacred and all that. In the Bible, the first in the Genesis, it says, in the beginning was the Word. The Word is sacred. And like Dr. Joyce and I are friends because she really loves me to play music. I'm a bit of a musician. She's always asking me to sing songs or play my guitar or sing. And the sound vibration is very healing and endearing to all of us. And mantras are basically sound. And I'm thinking also of the primordial shamans and the Native American traditions where they gather around the fire and they just chant and wail and go, hey, oh, yeah. And in the sweat lodge, too, the wailing goes up and the chanting goes out from your soul. And it's a very healing, purging sound, and it's like often called sound therapy. And wherever you find that sound, it's a healing. And many yogis, too, say you don't need medicine, you just need to chant Om, Om, and do your chanting. So in many different ways, music and healing and sounds have a tremendous magic and power to them, which is not quite understood, but is actually very effective.
No, I think so.
An article in the newspaper in the last week how music played in hospitals shortens hospital stays.
There you go. And what do people do? They pay $100 to go see a Broadway show just to sit for an hour or 2, or they go to a concert at Lincoln Center or Carnegie Hall. They just want to sit and be able to sit for an hour with music that makes harmony in their life, and suddenly they feel that they have a justified existence. They had a wonderful trip to New York. They had a cultural journey. They did something that was worthwhile. They did healing to their soul and to their body.
Now, Dr. Joyce, can I go back to you now?
Sure.
Now, you're a neurologist. Can you explain what that is? Neurology?
A neurologist is a doctor that deals with disorders of the brain and spinal cord and nervous system. Some of the disorders are physiological, like migraine, or disorders of electrical function, like epilepsy, Some of them are biochemical, like Parkinsonism or tics. Some of them are structural, like tumors or strokes, or or vascular bases like strokes. Some of them are due to injuries, like traumatic brain injury. And then there's a whole range of neurobehavior disorders, as well as muscle disorders like degenerative problems of the nervous system. So that's what I do, is see patients with various, or over the years, I've been a neurologist for many years. I finished medical school at Columbia in 1976, and then I was at Mayo for my medicine, and then I came back to Columbia and did a neurology residency, and I've done several fellowships in movement disorder.
And might I add that she's Phi Beta Kappa and graduated as magna cum laude.
Right. Now,
something I've done for years, and this is on a different level and in a different vein for the lay public. Oliver Sacks is a noted neurologist and writer. He writes about it in an understandable way, and he's written many books, and recently a book on music.
Okay, but I still want to get back to you.
Yes.
What I just described to you, how do you explain, as a neurologist, the extraordinary pleasure that I was feeling sitting in the park with the sun on my breasts? It's like I could feel the energy coming in, particularly from the sensitive part of my breasts.
Well, probably some sensory stimulus through your nerve endings, through your spinal cord, maybe to limbic areas of your brain, and maybe then putting out neurochemicals so that you felt pleasure.
So what I'm saying is that the nipples, the end of the breasts in particular, are very sensitive,
right.
and we usually think of...
So you had heat stimuli, or whatever the stimuli was from, it may not just be heat, but sunlight. I'm not familiar with Dr. Kine's work, but whatever the stimulus was from the sunlight triggered an electrical and chemical reaction in your nervous system, resulting in pleasure. And that's wonderful. So
could we not take from this a model that if we had access to a greater body of knowledge that was freed of a lot of the guilt and shame, could there not be a model that our sexual makeup could also be a portal to extraordinary healing and health, if we understood it and didn't abuse it?
Yes.
But wait a second, let me interject. You didn't use it. You were devoid of sex. You see, you weren't interested in sex or flirting with anybody. That had nothing to do with sex.
Oh!
You just expose your body to sunlight.
Absolutely, Frank.
That certain receptors, certain areas of your body, and I don't know what they are. In your case, you felt that it was your breast, but it may be multiple areas of your body when exposed to sunlight result in, electrical and biochemical change resulting in pleasure.
Right. All your pores are receptacles, and every pore of your body was receiving, on your upper body was receiving sunlight, so there was stimulus all over.
But there are sensory receptors, the heat and pressure and pain and touch. There are multiple different sensory receptors in every area of your body in the skin. And each receptor is sensitive to a certain kind of stimulus. And when that stimulus happens, there's an electrical chemical signal that's transmitted throughout your nervous system, resulting in chemical changes, and that result in mood changes and body energy changes and other maybe motor changes, result in change your output and change your life.
Okay, now, Frank, you were talking about the sexual nature. No, of course not. There was no sexual stimulation, but I was in a heightened state of awareness. Even though my eyes were closed, I went from this...
Probably somewhat concerned, a heightened anticipation. So your adrenaline probably was flowing, so it probably magnified any response
No, here's what was happening.
Go ahead.
If some guy was coming by that wasn't in the vibe, like the two guys, you know, sitting at the bench, because it was like, you know, even if you're fully clothed, when you sit down next to somebody or on the next bench, you're aware of their presence, you know, and it doesn't have to be a sexual thing. You just sort of, sometimes you kind of want a lot of space around you. You want to be more isolated.
Right.
And you don't really want to talk to people in any way. Right. So I kind of felt like when I can't remember who sat down first, but it was like we were checking each other out, right? And then 5 minutes goes by, 10 minutes, and then you've accepted each other, you know? So there was that. Now, if somebody else had come along, just sort of out of the blue, into that energy zone, and if they go, oh my God, this woman's got her top off, that would have totally ruined the experience I was having. Even if my eyes were closed, I could have felt energetically that pull. Right. Now, is that like ESP? Does any of the studies that you've done have...
Yeah, of course, that's telepathy. There's a mental field around us.
No, I know, Frank, I know you and I believe in that, but I wanted to know from a neurologist.
Buddhic, Atmic, Monadic, and Logoic, like 7 emanating rays around every body. And if you've seen the paintings by Alex Gray and the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors and stuff, who paints the skeletal structure and the nervous system and the auric fields around you, there's many actual fields around you that are multidimensional and invisible to our naked eye, but there's a sensitive field that our intuitive consciousness connects on that we usually call telepathy. So your telepathy and communication with those fellows came to an even keel, and you all agreed to just enjoy the sunlight peacefully together and go into that beautiful state of harmony.
Right.
And that, of course, another person could come by and vibe into that who is sensitive.
Right.
And then there would be no threat.
Right. Right. But still, I thank you, Frank, for that explanation. But now, Dr. Joyce, is there anything in the study of neurology that would study telepathy?
Well, I'm sure there is, and my knowledge is minimal, but I'll make a statement that in people who are blind, cannot see at all, if they're shown something and then asked to guess, they will guess right more often than based on chance. And it's called blind sight, if I'm correct. So there is vision in people when there is no vision. So even if your eyes are closed, you have vision. And I'm not an authority on it.
Right.
I don't understand,
I don't claim to be authority, but I would simply say that that's spirit. We have spirit with us, and of course spirit oversees everything. We have a higher self, and that, like the astral body, can see things and therefore we know, like when you're driving too, you have a sixth sense about you that to protect yourself against accidents and things, because there's a higher body, there's an outer energy field that is aware of things that we rely on our 5 senses, our 5 physical senses, to deduct and create logic and protect ourselves and proceed safely. But there is a 6th sense. And a great movie by Shambhala came out called The Sixth Sense, and all that, seeing ghosts and everything.
Yes.
But there's far more to it than that, and that's what's in play here, that we have the blind sight, as you said, that there's a spirit body that's with us that sees these things and knows things, and that's that.
Well, I'm happy to investigate this further, Paula. You've raised many interesting questions.
Thank you.
And I will look into a few of the issues that we've discussed, and I will either get back to you personally or give the information to Frank, and then you can review it with your listeners.
No, I really appreciate that. And either you can come into the studio and we can have some roll-ins, or else you can give me some websites and some visuals, because what I'm leading up to is, can we as broadcasters broadcast information that actually makes people more joyful and more alert? So you're not just giving depressing news, you're able to call to people's attention some things that they should know about that are alarming, that need to be rectified, but also give the tools to rectify.
Right, that's absolutely right. And there are lots of tools out there that people have discovered, either individually, on a personal basis, or scientifically in group study. And these things helpful and healing to others if they're provided with that information.
Right.
So I couldn't agree with you more.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Frank, do you have any things to say before we close?
Well, I just love you dearly, and I'm thankful for the work you do on public access and on the internet and taking this whole medium to the next level and making it available. And although we're not sure who is listening to us in cyberspace, whether or not it's just us three having a conversation and discovering these thought processes and coming to terms with a new sense of confidence and about the world of spirit as a reality, or if there are 100,000 other people out there worldwide through the internet actually checking out further down the rabbit hole, TV Central, your program, who knows? And in reality, God knows, and God is source to all beings, and there's many religions and beliefs and way to pray, but there's really one supreme source intelligence to which we all are connected to, and the unified field of higher consciousness and truth will prevail, and the more we accept it and relax and our fears and go into faith and love and know that we are all one. There's really only one race, the human race, and even though we have different skin color and skin tones and ideas and cultures, basically blood belongs inside the body, not out, and war is barbaric and primitive of the old school when we didn't have digital cable television and satellite communications available to us. And okay, we had to defend our watering hole because the enemy's over the hill and going to trade us. So war was noble, and for thousands of years we've treated war as noble. But now in today's age, since we know that war is barbaric and primitive and has no place in today's society.
Wow, Frank, thank you so much. As you were saying that, I was shooting around my apartment, starting with the apple pie that I just made. Do you want to come over for apple pie?
Delicious apple pie.
we can taste it.
No, come over. Are you in the Gramercy Park area?
That's why I called you, Paul, actually, to say that we're going to look at what's ailing Healing America, my little trip to Mexico, and I'm having some friends over, and come by and share the apple pie.
And if you have your book by Dr. Kine, please bring it. I'd love to see it.
Oh, you know what? I don't have that book, and I tried to get it. Oh, the end of the story with Dr. Kine is this.
Yes.
So I'm in the island of Cyprus, and I'm starting to write letters because I have all the time in the world, and I have a beautiful place to live. And my discovery in Cyprus, and Frank, you'll really appreciate this, I felt that I had something to add to Dr. Kime's research, and that was this. Vincenzo and I used to do a lot of fasting, and once we were fasting on grapes. We ate only grapes, and we would chew up the seeds also. And when we were fasting on grapes versus just eating regular food, and he was a really good Italian chef, my ex-husband was from Sicily, we could, as opposed to just eating beautiful pasta and nice red wine, when we were only eating grapes, when we would go into the Mediterranean Sea to take a swim, we would stay in for an hour and a half, and it was like the time went by in 10 minutes. And what was happening, I felt that the salt water was just as important as the sunlight for healing. So I was so excited to start to share some of the research I was doing on my own body with Dr. Kime. So I wrote to his publisher, and his publisher wrote back to me and said, alas, Dr. Kime had just gotten killed in an avalanche accident. He was backpacking. And so I never had the ability to meet Dr. Kime, but that book had impressed me so much.
Right.
So
it's more than important than taking showers. We should take baths, and I throw like sea salt into the bath, and that helps us because basically we're 80% water. And when we sit in a bathtub and we connect with the water as an element, as a fundamental element of Earth, it's very healing. And if you throw some sea salt into the bath, you're going to help affect your own personal balancing act and healthy connection with who you are as a living, healthy, clean human being.
I suspect that there are other people carrying on his research.
Yeah, probably so. I would like to. You know, another thing, Frank.
Say that and find out.
Well, we'll look into it. I mean, I'm so excited to meet it.
We're on our way to the library, actually, do some research, so we'll follow up on this and do some more internet and actual book research into this.
And you'll say us some of the the apple pie.
Oh, definitely. Now, the guy's name is Dr. Kime, K-I-M-E, and the name of the book, specifically, the name of the book is Sunlight Can Save Your Life. Sunlight Can Save Your Life.
Okay.
And
we'll get back to you by Friday on this.
okay, and then one last thing, Frank. Do you have that footage of me taking a fire bath up at your place?
I must have it somewhere. I'll look around for it, see if I can find it.
If you have it, I'd love to roll it into this, and or maybe at a later date we can talk about the purifying effect of fire, because that was a really amazing experience. How I got cleansed by a fire.
And that's something I've gotten into, and I've decided to do the fire ceremony every full moon now as a commitment, either in my place of state or other people's, and just create a fire ceremony and honor Mother Earth and look at the full moon and connect to the elements, because I've also found that planting fruit trees is the only thing that makes sense to me, because I've been reported, I've been like a social political activist for many years as a playwright and an actor and a human rights, a person who's interested in the right versus the wrong thing with a political injustice and corruption. And it's all, as my mother said to me, Frank, there's always been corruption in Tammany Hall, and the politicians, they're always going to take you for a ride, and there's always been corruption, and everyone always has to protest, and you're never really going to change anything. And I said, well, I'm going to change things, I'm going to do what I can, but I realized that what really makes sense is to plant a fruit tree, is to work with earth, is to sit in front of the fire, is to look at the full moon and see the eclipse. And like this morning, or last night, went out by the moon and just saw the moon and the river and feeling. You hold a tree. When you take time out to connect to the elements, air, rebirthing, connected breathing, fire, sit with a fire, enjoy it, water, take a long bath or jump in the river or an ocean, just because it's a healing thing to do. Air, fire, water, and earth is the four directions, too, that the Native Americans call upon from the east, west, east, south, west, and north. These are grounding cords of connections that will help us as a human race to survive, because I'm feeling, I've been reading Barbara Hand-Clow and Barbara Marciniak, and these are different channeled books from the Pleiadians, which is an extra, a galaxy out there that are communicating with us and telling us that through these books that actually Earth has been in quarantine for many thousands of years because we're so bellicose. We are not invited like diplomats to the table to the rest of the intergalactic communication. There's many extraterrestrials and higher intelligences out there. We're not invited to the club because human beings are still primitive. We're like the one species that actually kills one another and enjoys killing one another. And it's so awful that the best picture of the year was No Country for Old Men, that glorified killing and dysfunctionality. And this is what we applaud and cheer, and Hollywood promotes this whole mindset that killing is acceptable. But and then we're coming into the new age now, and the end of the Mayan calendar in 2012. And what's happening is that every 26,000 years, the planet Earth revolves around the galaxy, does its cycle. And we're coming out of the Kali Yuga, and the Vedic, ancient texts that are millions of years old and talk about the truth, that how we're coming out of the Kali Yuga era, which is the period of darkness, and we're going to come into the period of enlightenment. And like what happened in 1987, when there was a harmonic convergence and 5 planets aligned with the Earth plane, in August 17, 1987, there was a major shift in consciousness, and people were becoming much more awakened and aware and telepathic and sensitive to the world of spirit and to their existence in the universe and the planet Earth as a living library through their cellular memory of millions of lifetimes and connected to all the great spirit that is out there. Now, the Native Americans have always said, they treated everything as spiritual and everything as sacred, and white man came along and made us, salute Jesus once a week and gave us that. All of a sudden, So when we as a human race, going back to our roots of the Native Americans and traditionally respect and watch sunrises and sunsets and respect the fire and respect the element, then the universe or all the intergalactic species and spiritual beings are going to start saying, well, you know what? There's a chance for humanity. The human race isn't so barbaric and primitive and stupid and bellicose. They do have a grounding cord. And there's more and more people that are communicating with themselves as a spiritual being in a universal paradigm of connectedness, and knowing that all this thing about violence and all that stuff is really archaic and barbaric and primitive.
Well, thank you so much, Frank, and I look forward to seeing you, and maybe you can help me get into SAG so I can get some voiceover work. Somebody told me I need to be in the Actors Union. Do you think that's possible?
Thousand out-of-work actors in the union. It's no guarantee you're going to get a job just because you get in the union.
Oh, no, I know.
But it's not, it doesn't, you know, there's no employment in show business. That's guaranteed.
I know.
Did you write down the name of the kind book?
What's that?
Did you write it down?
Oh, okay, I'll write it down.
Sunlight can save your life.
What?
Sunlight can save your life.
By Dr. Keim, okay.
By Dr.
Keim.
Okay.
Thank you, Paula.
Okay, thank you very much.
And enjoy the pie.
Okay. No, you're coming over. I'll wait for you. I'm going to enjoy the sunlight, actually. I think I'll come out on that because I'm going to sunbathe. I have a nice shot here in the winter time.
And send the reflection of the sunlight on over to us.
Yeah, but you'll be here soon,
Wow,
okay?
we're going to be going out.
Okay, take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So, there we are. That was so interesting. I didn't expect that to happen. So you never know. I have always wanted to, I've been wanting to tell that tale about hooking energy with the mantras and how the most important yantra or shape, you know, we think of a yantra and a shape being like a mantra, like the Star of David or the cross or the swastika. Then there's other basic symbols like that. Those are yantras. You appreciate them with the eyes. And there's a couple hundred, they're in the hundreds. They can get more elaborate. Like here, I'll show you one to have an idea of a yantra. Here is a yantra, and they can get complicated. But you still have thousands and thousands of mantras, which are what you appreciate with your ears. They're audio. And these are visual. But the most important yantra, or shape, is the human body. So that means our human body, rightly understood, is one of the most valuable tools, just as a yantra or a mantra is, to unfold awareness and consciousness. And I guess my interest in 9/11 truth has to do with awareness of what's going on around us. And that I think spiritual studies and